Hi, everyone, and welcome back again to Teal Talks. My name is Holly. I am one of the counselors/advocates at SARCC Lebanon, and I use she, her pronouns.
My name is Chris. I am also one of the counselors/advocates at SARCC Lebanon, and I also use she, her pronouns.
And for those of you who may not have tuned in last week, we are well within our Sexual Assault Awareness Month. So, our topics this month have been revolving around the theme of building safe online spaces. So, this week we wanted to dive in again to that theme and talk a little bit about non consensual image sharing and talk a little bit about revenge porn and things like that as well. So in order to talk about that, we wanted to start with a definition, and we wanted to talk about affirmative consent. So I'm going to give you an actual definition, and then we'll kind of talk more as we go through. So affirmative consent is a knowing, voluntary, and mutual decision among all participants to engage in sexual activity. Consent can be given through words or actions, as long as those words or actions create clear permission regarding willingness to engage in the sexual activity. So when we look at consent or we think of consent, we want to make sure that it is ongoing, that it is very clear, and that it is communicated by all participants in that activity. So affirmative consent is making sure that those who are participating in something like image sharing, especially when we think about explicit image sharing or nudes or anything that might be showing genitals or private body parts, we want to make sure that everyone who's sending and receiving those images have consented to that actively and clearly. So when we talk about consent and what that looks like, we also want to make sure that when someone says yes, they are actively willing and wanting to consent to that. And they're not saying yes because of a fear of what a no might mean. They're not saying yes because of coercion or pressure or what the resulting no might end up. So when they say yes, they don't want to think, I'm afraid what could happen if my partner breaks up with me. I'm afraid of how our interaction might go if I were to say no in this kind of communication and back and forth. So consent has to be consistent, it has to be clear on all sides, and we want to make sure that that consent isn't coming from a place of fear, coercion, or pressure either.
So, affirmative consent kind of applies to even things beyond image sharing. Like Holly said, like we want to make sure that we practice affirmative consent in all spaces, whether they be online or in person. But another really important thing is to have open discussions about how to protect yourself down the line. So, this is really important for particularly explicit image sharing. And when we say explicit image sharing, we are kind of including sexting, nudes, things like that. Or even just some risque photos. So when we do that, we want to have conversations with the people that we are sending those pictures to, the people who will be receiving them, about what does this look like down the line? How do I protect myself? How do you protect yourself? And being very open, clear, and setting very firm limits and boundaries on that is really important. So it's not to say that somebody can't or won't do something with that image despite a conversation, but it can prevent some of those things and create some safety if you do have that conversation about what are you going to do with this? How do I make sure that I'm safe? Making sure that that person isn't sharing this with their friends or disseminating it to other people is super important. So along with that, which kind of feeds into that, is revenge porn. So Holly and I wanted to spend some time just talking about what revenge porn is, what it looks like, and what some of the ways that we can kind of work to combat that are, or what some ways other spaces have worked to combat that. So in revenge porn cases, people often ask the question, or often question, not ask the question, often question the victim's decision to take or send photos rather than why a person would violate somebody else's trust or privacy by sending that out. And revenge porn isn't just about explicit imagery in the form of photos, but also in the form of videos. So this encompasses a lot of different things.
Definitely. And so when we think about revenge porn and how we've seen revenge porn across different social medias, we've also seen the way in which various platforms have kind of reacted to revenge porn or non-consensual image sharing. So over the past couple of years, we've seen various social media platforms as well as platforms that upload and share pornography kind of take action in order to address the issue of revenge porn and non-consensual image sharing. So within the past few years, Facebook actually added the ability to report intimate images that have been shared without the subject of those images consent. And so that is a really great option. If you see an image or are the subject of an image, you're able to report that to Facebook's, and it is then considered a violation of the community guidelines, and it will be under revision. The image can be taken down, and there's also a kind of community board against uploading images as well. So Facebook has taken the next step against sharing and uploading those images. When it comes to sites such as Pornhub, we've seen within the past, I believe, year or two, they've actually removed the ability to upload images or videos yourself. On Pornhub, I believe it's called amateur porn, but that has kind of taken back the ability for users to upload their own pornography, which has really been the stance of Pornhub against revenge porn as well as child pornography. And that has impacted kind of the view overall in the pornography industry against revenge porn and kind of that sharing of non-consensual images.
So there are some apps like Facebook that have put in community guidelines and things like that, taken preventative measures to try to mitigate some of the spreading of sexually explicit images or pornography. Apps like Snapchat and Instagram are two apps that will notify you if somebody takes a screenshot. So Snapchat does that when you send pictures, when you are chatting with someone, if you send a picture that way, and Instagram does that through a direct message. So if I pull up my Instagram feed and I take a screenshot of it, it does not notify somebody of that. But if I send a direct message and somebody screenshots that, it would notify me. So those are two things that have tried to combat that. But unfortunately, there are ways around it. So there are a lot of things out there about how to screen record, how to turn your phone on airplane mode. I am not good at technology, so I do not know all of those tips and tricks, but there are ways around it is the bottom line. So even if you think that you're sending pictures on a platform that would notify you if somebody took a screenshot, there are potentially ways that they would be able to do that without it notifying you. And at the end of the day, sometimes once someone takes that screenshot, we don't really know what they do with it or what happened. So while we have this notification saying that they did it, we don't really know what they do with it. So that's a really important thing to know for protecting ourselves and protecting other people that we know who might be sharing images that way.
And when we're considering non-consensual image sharing and revenge porn, it's really important to consider the law. And so what I wanted to bring up next is, at the moment, out of our 50 states, 26 states have a law in place against non-consensual image sharing. In Pennsylvania, it is illegal, and the law is called unlawful dissemination of intimate image. So it carries some jail time, and that is illegal. It does not matter what the age of the victim or the person who has been distributing that image is. And so that is really important to keep in mind.
So this is super important for parents and for teens, especially because we've seen a lot of increase in teens sharing sexually explicit images. And in the state of Pennsylvania, although it varies from state to state, we are here in Pennsylvania, so we're going to speak specifically about that. People under 18 should not be sending nude, explicit pictures because it can be considered child pornography. So even if that is taken and shared consensually, because the person in the photograph is under the age of 18, whether I'm under 18 and I'm sending that picture, or if I'm somebody else receiving that picture of somebody who's under the age of 18, it could be considered the dissemination of child pornography or the receipt of child pornography. So this is really important for parents to know and talk to their kids about. Obviously, there are some consequences to doing those things, but making sure that we keep our kids safe is really important. Talking to them about some of the risks of sending nudes, sexting, things like that, making sure that they're safe and that they know these laws. If you are interested in more information on that, you can Google that, the law that Holly talked about, as well as some of the laws in Pennsylvania around sharing, image sharing, even if it is consensual, for people who are under the age of 18, and just some of what that constitutes or what that looks like. There's some really great resources for having conversations with kids or with teenagers about sharing those images or sending those images and what might happen. And some of this is pertinent across the board. making sure that we have those conversations with our kids, as well as the people who, if we as adults are sharing those images consensually with, to make sure that those images are not disseminated or not shared unconsensually. And I think something else that Holly mentioned in kind of talking about revenge porn and things like that is that sometimes these things can be taken without somebody's knowledge, which is definitely not consent. So if somebody has a camera in their bedroom that you don't know about and you engage in sexual activity with them consensually, but you didn't consent to that camera being on or that video being there, that's super important. And there are legal options for somebody having taken a video like that or taken a picture even without your consent of you being naked, of you engaging in sexual activity and things like that. So it's really important to just be knowledgeable of that. And sometimes revenge porn is that, something that you didn't even know was taken, which is why Pornhub put up some limitations on sharing amateur videos, because it didn't really ask, like, did everybody in this video consent to uploading this video? Did they know that this video was taken? So some of those things are really positive, but like we've talked about, there's definitely some risks and some things that it's important to have conversations about to keep ourselves safe and to keep the people we care about safe.
And something that's really important to keep in mind is, if this is something that you have been a victim of, that there are resources and there is support out there. If you're in the Lebanon County area, if you have experienced the kind of distribution of a private image, that is not fair, that is not consensual, and that is something that you have resources to be able to talk about that if that's something that you need or want to do. Even if this is an image that you created and maybe gave to someone that you trusted and cared for, but you did not agree to the distribution of that image, keep in mind that that isn't consensual at that point. And there is still support if that's something that you need to process and be able to kind of talk about the fact that your privacy and your trust has been violated in such a way.
Well, we really appreciate you all tuning in for some information on non-consensual image sharing and some hopefully helpful tips on, that was a little bit of a tongue twister. I'm surprised I got that out. Hopefully helpful tips on how to keep yourself safe, how to protect yourself. And like Holly mentioned, some of the resources in your area. So we have SARCC in both Lebanon and Schuylkill, but there are rape crisis centers and other centers and resources in every county. So if you're not sure if something was not appropriate or was illegal, you can always reach out to your local center, reach out to a hotline or any other helpline, and just talk with someone about, like, hey, I'm not really sure what this was. What can I do about it? And there's people who are willing and able to kind of walk you through that and help you navigate whatever course of action that you want to take. So we are always here for you. And I'm not going to steal Holly's thunder about leaving comments, but I'm going to cue her to say it. So
we always want to keep the conversation going. The best thing that you can do is to reach out and talk. If you have questions, there are people with answers, or at least people with directions to point you to an answer. Like Chris said, we love to hear from you in the comment section, both on our YouTube and our Facebook. And we hope that you tune in next time. Thank you all for watching.
bye, everybody.